No. No, he had messaged me. So, all right, why don't you go over here to Mom? All right, come here. All righty.
Well, actually, Stephen and Lisa spent 2 hours with me yesterday researching some stuff, and the guy behind me helped out a lot, and so it's all, they've got everything they need now, except they'll need some of us to sign when they get ready to close on it, but other than that, they've got everything they need, so, thankfully.
He said that was it, so I'm not going to ask further.
Me either.
So
Format questions I did not know
it
the
was
answers to.
it.
He had the answers from the last time, and then Bruce got some other information too.
We gave it our best effort for sure for what we had available. So.
He wanted membership from the last 3 years. He wanted how many families were represented. I have a lot of information on that. So.
Yeah, I could have given it to you from 15 back.
Yeah.
There's more detailed information for that time period than the last 5 years, for sure. So, all right, well, we'll go ahead and get started. I know there's one or two that are joining in online, and obviously it'll be a little bit different tonight as far as prayer requests go. What I would like to do, just because of kind of knowing who would be here tonight, what I'd like to do is go over some prayer requests and then actually go over the lesson for tonight, and then actually, just because it's a smaller group, be able to just break up and spend some time in prayer groups together and kind of finish out the time like that. And so we'll do some prayer requests first, just so that we make sure we have the time allotted for that, and then the rest of it should not be super long. A couple of things that would be some updates. Be in prayer for. Here we go. Be in prayer for the wall drops. There, he said that, which if he's watching, this is going to come either way. But he had told me that I know he's been working late, and I say that honestly. I know that. But they're trying to leave first thing in the morning, and they had some more getting ready to do. But I'm definitely opening up the gate to tease him about how much packing Brother Terry takes to go on a trip. So that's fair game. He just asked for it when he said that. So, but they be in prayer. In all seriousness, Brother Terry and Miss Pam are supposed to take off and get away just for anniversary and some stuff. And so I just hope they have a great trip. The two of them. I think they're headed to Florida and be gone for a week. I'm sorry. Okay, the Orlando area. Also, a couple other travel things. The Benzels are leaving tomorrow for just kind of a short family getaway, not quite that long, but just a family getaway. So be in prayer for the Benzels. And then also, Brother Billy, our intern, is going to be gone for a few days to a wedding up north. And so he's doing all of that in the midst of school and everything. So be in prayer for those as they are traveling. And then some other things. I was talking earlier, but those of you that are watching, be in prayer for Miss Melba. A lot of you didn't know. I know my wife updated it for the ladies on Facebook. I found out after church Sunday night that apparently on Saturday, Miss Melba took a pretty good fall, and which is why she wasn't here. But they had to do a kind of a immediate operation on Sunday because she injured her hip, and so they operated on that on Sunday, and then she has been at Providence from then until today. But there was just some limited communication ability. Been in contact with her daughter each day this week, and just difficulty trying to get in touch. But just be in prayer for her. She's had a couple of really bad reactions to the pain medication that just have affected her a lot heavier. They're needful, obviously, and Miss Melba, I talked with her on the phone just about the pain and everything. but her just sometimes at that age, those heavy pain medications just affect differently. They just do. And yesterday was a really bad day. She was supposed to try to be transferred yesterday to a temporary care facility for therapy, but due to just kind of a relapse yesterday, they weren't able to do that. The plan, her daughter told me this morning that everything was on pace for her to get moved today. And when I have an exact location and room, last time she had been told there was kind of two main care facilities, and it was just whoever had an open room and availability first. But I believe it's going to be the one off of Gray Lot and Schillinger. But once I find that out, I'll let everybody know. And the plan, I think now, is for her to be moved there today, and then should be about a week and a half to 2 weeks of therapy before she gets to go home. But be in prayer for Miss Melba. It was just sweet getting to talk to her, and she said, I just wanted so badly to be there on Sunday, and it was hard and everything. And so just be in prayer for her and quick healing. Be in prayer for Miss Raquel. She seems to be in good spirits and doing well from her fall. It wasn't near as severe, but just something that's she recognizes as a lot more of a common possibility. But she's gotten settled into her new care facility. And if anybody is interested and would like to visit, I have room numbers and details on that. And she's off of a care facility off of Gray Lot, a little farther over. But she's doing well, and so just continue to be in prayer for her. She still has dizzy spells, but be in prayer for her as well. Miss Tina is not able to be here tonight, but she asked prayer, Miss Tina Grace, she's having surgery on her hand next Monday. I don't have a time for that, but I know it's been something she's been trying to get done for a while. But that surgery is going to happen next Monday, so be in prayer for that. And then a few other things. If you will remember my dad, Ken Newport, I talked to him today. I didn't realize it was something that had been happening, but I guess this third time it's happened. He's recently had some spells where for about 3-4 days he will get pretty violently just nauseated, and there's really nothing else other than that, but just nauseated. And it's happened. It's one thing that when it first time it happens, you think it's a stomach bug or something, but it's been happening. This is the third time within about the last 3 months it's happened. So something else, and he's supposed to go in and try to figure out what's happening. But just if you would remember Ken Newport, and then also if you remember Teresa's dad, Jerry Colombo. He went in yesterday, and they, as far as they know, everything is checked out. It wasn't anything serious, but had some chest pains that were symptomatic of a possible minor heart attack. It wasn't that, and they've done stress tests and everything, but he spent a good time yesterday in the hospital, and that I know of, they didn't necessarily find anything conclusive that was concerning, but just still not sure why, what it was that caused that. And so if you'll be in prayer for him. And then also lastly, the last one I have, be in prayer for a missions conference coming up here at the end of October. And a couple of families we're supposed to have, Crotch family, and then also the Tarwater family. And so just continue. We'll say more about that here in the next 2 weeks. But be in prayer for them, and just that God would use that in a mighty way in our church. So that is all of the ones I have. Are there any other prayer requests that I can take down? Michelle's mom. Okay. Be in prayer for Ms. Michelle Wheat's mother having, I don't know when that happened, but okay. Okay. Just be in prayer for recovery for Ms. Michelle Wheat's mom from the surgery. I want to remember that. Anything else? I have not today, no. The last time I saw him was Sunday.
Today was his birthday.
Okay.
So I tried him and he said he wasn't able to take calls.
Sometimes I have I have a lot of respect, nothing but respect for him, but sometimes one of the things that I respect most about him is if he gets to a point where he just doesn't want to take any more phone calls, he just won't do it. And it's a quality few people have today and can afford that freedom. But he will. I've been there before when that's been the case. So, but definitely remember him and all of our seniors. I've got some different things that I've been praying about for our church to just do and ways to help and minister in. But just be in prayer for them. Brother Clarence, and also was mentioned the trust, and they've just got a lot on their plate that they're trying to get done, and health and things get in the way. But be in prayer for them as well. Any others? All right, be in prayer for Rich Wilson. Also, I just remembered I didn't get a name from any of the articles, but remember the family of the 5-year-old boy. I didn't hear all the details of it, but there was a 5-year-old boy that was shot in an altercation at a Walmart over off of, I think it was Azalea, or no, near University, and got caught in the crossfire of whatever was going on, and just foolish, not needful. But I did not hear whether or not it was fatal or, but just be with specifically the family. And I don't know any more details than that. I just know it made a couple of pop-up headlines as far as recent things this last week. Anything else? Alrighty. Well, we will, like I said, my plan is to go over our lesson for tonight, and then just be able to spend time at the end kind of praying together and spend a little bit more time. And we're at the size of group, I think we can do that, and I'd like to do that and pray with each other. So we'll do that, and we'll pray for these at the end. But for right now, if you'll get or find your Bible and look at 2 Corinthians chapter 5. As we've been going through our series on personal evangelism and what the Bible has to say as far as when it comes to our commission as a believer, soul winning, and the practice of soul winning, and just answering some basic questions. You know, who's qualified to do that? Whose responsibility is soul winning? What does it take to be a soul winner? How can I grow as a soul winner? What are some things I should look out for and learn, or ways I can grow and practice this? And it doesn't necessarily matter who you are or how long you've been saved or even been a soul winner. There are always areas to grow. There are always areas to grow, and some very just humbling reminder that it will stick with me hopefully for the rest of my life. When I was in Bible college, the church that I attended during that time, they had a big children's ministry, and they would meet out in the gym for like children's church and everything. And there was a gentleman out there, and I cannot for the life of me remember his name, but they would, they preach salvation in some way, shape, form, or fashion every single week. And every week there was children that would be dealt with. They wouldn't get saved every week, but a lot of times because, it was a gym full of about, 80 to 100 kids, there was a lot of decisions, a lot of questions about that. And they had a team of people, but there was one gentleman specifically that was assigned, and he was kind of the key individual, and he had been doing that for I don't know how many years. I really don't. And I remember as a college student there towards the back, and I was helping some kids, pay attention and everything. I remember looking back and watching him in the back of the room, and the entire time the preacher was speaking to the kids, he was constantly writing on a piece of paper in the back of his Bible. And after week, I noticed he did it every single time. And there was one week I went back there and I introduced myself and I just said, "Hey, I'm sorry if this is nosy." I said, "But I've just been really curious." I said, "Every single week you're constantly writing either in your Bible or on a piece of paper." And he said, and I said, "What is that?" And he said, every week, just as the Lord brings it to mind, he said, I try to write down new things or ways in which would help me to better understand how to explain the gospel to these children each week. And it was so humbling to me that here you have a guy that probably led quite literally hundreds of kids to the Lord, and every week was understanding the fact I can still grow. I can still mature in this area. As the Lord uses things, or I'm not above hearing something that can be a help. Why? Because if there's a way that God can use something just to help and make it that much clear, not that the gospel needs my help necessarily, but just something that I can understand, or a verse I didn't have marked before, or something that would make the gospel very clear and help in those conversations. Weekly, this man was making changes. It wasn't a matter of he had his memorized go-through thing with salvation, but weekly changing, altering his method, not the gospel, but the method in which he was explaining the gospel to these children and these young minds each week. And I thought that was so interesting. But all these things that as we look and we've talked about what is the message of the gospel and understanding that correctly. And then last couple of weeks, we talked about the manner in which you do it, or the approach, making sure that there's things you do and are incorporating into that. This week we're going to switch just a little bit, and this is going to be very, very practical. Some of it's going to not seem sermon-like at all, and it's not supposed to, but very practical, helpful reminders. And the reason is that oftentimes we become transfixed on the big things of life, and when it's truly the consistency of little things that has the most impact. In other words, sometimes what I put the most effort and mindset towards are sometimes those big marquee moments of life, or the big things or events, when in reality, oftentimes, it's consistently doing the little things that has the opportunity to make the greatest impact in life. We've all heard the quote, it's the little things that matter. And the only problem I'd have with that is that in saying it's the little things that matter is that you're cutting out the big things altogether, when, yes, the big things should matter as well as the little things. But the idea kind of behind that is that while you may have a few opportunities and I may have a few opportunities for big things that happen in life, whatever you want to apply that to, I have far more opportunity to do little things consistently that over time will continually make an impact. And if I have a mindset to where I only put effort and mindset towards big things, and when it comes to little things, it's kind of, well, I do it, but I do it half-heartedly, or I don't really put all my thought and time into it, I miss on a lot of opportunities. We miss on a lot of opportunities to do that. Over time, the little things often turn into bigger things. When it comes to the practice of soul winning, it's the little things that can go unnoticed. This evening, we're going to look over some very familiar but practical reminders that will hopefully be a help when it comes to soul winning. As you look at 2 Corinthians chapter 5. We're going to look at verse 20. And I want us to consider the idea of manners. Manners. Not necessarily, how your mom told you mind your manners, but in a sense, your manners, your mannerisms when soul winning. Thinking about it seems so little, so insignificant. But look with me at 1 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 20. Paul writes, and understand just after a wonderful explanation of the gospel previous in this chapter, he's talking about what God has called us to do. In verse 20, he says, now then, we are, talking about those saved individuals, we are ambassadors. Incredible word there. Ambassadors, he says, for Christ, as though God did beseech you by us, we pray you, in Christ's stead, be ye reconciled to God. We are ambassadors. Webster defines the word ambassador as an official envoy or an authorized representative or messenger. When we think about an ambassador of the United States, that holds significance when it comes to governmental or political terms. It's a big deal when something happens to an ambassador. Why? Because by doing something to an ambassador, that directly is saying I'm doing that to that country they represent. It's a big deal to be an ambassador. Why? Because of who you represent. Paul, though, in this illustration, goes a step further and he says, okay, it's not just a matter of you being an ambassador of the United States or France or wherever. You're an ambassador, he says, of who? Of Christ. That's, okay, it's a big deal. It would be a huge deal for anybody in here to be an ambassador of the United States. What a privilege. That would be an incredible responsibility. But Paul says, okay, we're going to take your eyes to something a little bit bigger, a little loftier. You're an ambassador of Jesus, the person of Jesus Christ. You're a personal envoy. It's not saying that you are equal with, but you are to represent in what you say and do the character and person of Jesus Christ. What a responsibility. What a responsibility. As such, as an ambassador, it is important that we take care of even the little things in how we represent him and what he has commissioned us to do. We've been going through it on Sunday nights, but I'd have us go back to 1 Thessalonians 1:5 when Paul reminds the Thessalonians and he says, I cause you to remember what manner of men we were among you for your sake. It mattered not just the fact of preaching the gospel and that they were at the synagogue or this or that. It mattered the little things, the mannerisms, their conversation, their lifestyle. All those things played a part in how God used them to reach the Thessalonians. Sometimes when it comes to soul winning, again, this is not something that is correcting anything. This is a healthy reminder of when we get ready and we think about, okay, as a soul winner, if I'm not careful, I can kind of do that with a half mindset on just little things. Little things. Every single person in this room knows instances of where when somebody has tried to be a witness, but they did not take care of their character or their mannerisms, and it ended up being something that was actually hurtful instead of helpful when it came to presenting the gospel. Now, can I control when people's feelings get hurt? Not all the time. I can't. I can, again, we already talked about it last week. I'm not the one that softens somebody's heart. That's the Holy Spirit. But what that person sees on the outside, you and I can control that. Whether that's in what I say or in how I appear, that is something I can control. And we look and we think, okay, that seems so insignificant. What you're wearing, the way you look, the way you talk, that seems so insignificant when the important thing is just get out there and soul win. And I'd agree. The important thing is to obey and do it. But I'd also rewind and remind us, Paul says you're ambassadors of who? Christ. Which means the little things, they should matter. They should matter. Now, by nature, I may not always think about them, but I should be challenged to do so. Why? Because the last thing I want is for something little to be a hindrance to somebody receiving the gospel when it was something I could have fixed beforehand. Mannerisms, little things to do, to not do that are just helpful. They're just helpful. And sometimes these things, they're not necessarily scriptural principles that are in the Bible. They're things that sometimes change even with society. But ultimately, the truth goes back to the fact of I am representing the person of Jesus Christ. And that is an unchanging. Who Christ is unchanging. The gospel is unchanging. But my mannerisms, that is something I ought to be acutely aware of. Why? Because I don't want that to be a hindrance when it comes to somebody receiving the gospel. Little things, my mannerisms of that. The following are the list of things I'm about to go over. Even in preparing them for this evening, they can sound almost like procedures that you go over in a meeting, but they're not. And they're helpful things. There's more things than this. Some of these may not seem like a big deal. And each one of these things I'm going to put down, they're not breaking points as to if I don't do this or I do this, it's going to hinder somebody receiving the gospel. But they're little things that sometimes can make a difference. Does that make sense? They're little things. They can sometimes make a difference. So first of all, a list of some things that it's a good idea to avoid. These are going to apply to different facets. Most of all, when we go door knocking as a church. And I'm so excited and praying about just timing and times of the week and how to, whether it's smaller individuals or as a whole, working through all those times. But my heart, my vision for our church is to have regularly scheduled each month, regularly things that we're going out and we're door knocking. And not just as an opportunity to reach out, but also giving us as believers an opportunity to grow in the area of soul winning. The only way I know to grow is to start to practice and just to do. And so before we do those things, there's some little things that are important to avoid. Some of them are going to seem like no-brainer, but there need to be reminders. First of all, when you go out and soul win, obviously it's a great idea to have tracts. You know, you don't need a tract to soul win. Even if you just accustomed to carrying a Bible, but it's a good idea to leave a tract, and we'll talk about that later. But when it comes to tracts, little thing, all right? Avoid leaving tracts in a mailbox. Number one, it's illegal. So that sounds like that sounds like such a no-brainer thing. But I'll just tell you, not with this church, but I've been on outreach opportunities with churches and stuffed whole neighborhoods or apartment complexes, mailboxes full. Is that going to lead to arrest? Hopefully not. But here's what that does. That's a bad testimony. It's a bad testimony. Just avoid it. It's a little thing. Just a little thing. And we think, is that really important? Mannerisms matter. Manners matter. Okay? Avoid putting them there. Another thing, there may have been a time and place when this was okay, but it's not a good idea to put church literature or tracts under car windshield wipers for a couple reasons. Number one, just like you and I, if I go out in a parking lot and there's something underneath my windshield wiper, that's an inconvenience. It is. Okay? So automatically, even if I didn't make somebody angry, automatically that's not starting it out. And here's the problem. What may be tucked underneath there have life-changing words for that individual. But what may turn that individual away is just by the fact of I wasn't considerate in where I put it. Does that make sense? And I don't want that to be the case. It's also for the reason of not just it's inconvenient, it's also can put people in very unsafe situations when it comes to personal awareness and personal defense. One of the big things that a lot of people and recommended authorities will tell, especially women that are by themselves or with kids, is it's a very common ploy for people, attackers, to put something underneath their windshield so that it gets them away from the door, and they have to remove it. And it's recommended to women, if something's ever underneath your windshield wiper, get in and immediately drive away before you ever take it off. Obviously, that's not what we're trying to do, but it's a bad representation. Does that make sense? Little things, little small mannerisms. Keep those out of the way. Another deal, when I'm door knocking, Try not to walk on the lawn. Now, you and I have both been in neighborhoods. There's literally no possible way other than to do that. There's a place that we minister right now, and there is not a way to get to some of the doors other than walking in their lawn. But if that is the case, even if it's going down the hill and going all the way around and then going up a driveway and around, that says you care. Most people may think, oh, that's cool, come on in. But somebody may see you out the front window and you tromping across their lawn and think, that person has no care for my property. Little thing. Mannerisms, avoid lawn. Don't look around or go around the back of the house and look in windows to see if somebody's there. Avoid, when you're talking to somebody, avoid positioning your body in a way that's threatening. There's a couple of things that are very simple, other than just eye contact. Show your hands. They may not be thinking anything bad, but it's a general perception. If somebody's hiding their hands, there's a possibility of hiding something. It may think, I don't know what to do with my hands other than putting them in your pockets. This does a whole lot more. It's a lot more opening. Avoid that. Avoid hiding around the corner. Positioning your body. Sunglasses, even if it's bright outside. Very, very not welcoming if somebody's knocking on your door and they have sunglasses on when they talk to you. All these things, again, are all these things going to prevent somebody from accepting Christ? Probably not, but they're little mannerisms. They're little mannerisms. And it's not just a matter of when we go out and door knock, we're representing Crossroads Baptist Church. Again, I remind us all the way back, first and foremost, we're ambassadors of Christ. If there's something little, something small that I may have not known before, again, constantly learning. There's things that we're going to go over. There's things you know that I don't know. I would love to know if we don't go over them. Something that is a help. Why? Because if I'm wanting to reach somebody with the gospel, it doesn't matter if it means something as small as take my sunglasses off once somebody answers the door. I don't want that to be a distraction. Does that make sense? Something so little. Avoid, or it's whenever you're, and we'll talk about this next week, but when you're soul winning or you're knocking, you have a partner with you and the two of you are going, there's nothing wrong, and it's great to enjoy fellowship while walking to houses. But once you're knocking on the door or when you're leaving, it's just very rude to have conversation on somebody's porch before they answer the door. You would feel weird if you heard two people talking on your front porch. That's just strange. Again, I don't want that to be a hindrance. Don't bother them if they are busy. There are some times that you can think, well, people always seem busy. Sometimes it takes discernment, but most of the times I'm talking about are pretty clear. They're pretty clear. Things that if it is the case, and the list I'm about to go over, if this is the case, I would recommend it's a good idea just to ask politely, can I leave you with this track? And then you have a great afternoon. They're not leaving empty-handed. It's not a failed missionary thing. But ultimately, I'm representing Jesus Christ. I want to get them the gospel, even if it means I can't talk to you. I don't want to do anything that's going to turn somebody off to the message of the gospel. If somebody's too busy, such cases would be if they're eating, if you woke them up, if they have company over, or there's a kid's birthday party happening in the backyard, if they're on their way out, if they're sick, if they're on the phone, if they're working on something, if they're mowing their yard or they're painting or they're underneath the hood of a car, and they're clearly, consumed and wrapped up in. Most people, especially here in the South, most people are courteous enough in the times that I've been door knocking. They'll give you the time of day, and you can think, okay, well, it wouldn't really matter. I'd stop mowing the lawn if somebody came and talk. It's the little things that represent Christ, okay? Little things. And again, if it's something that I feel like, okay, they're busy, they're wrapped up, and to do this is going to create a negative image of the person I'm trying to introduce them to, I want to avoid that. Some things, it's just a matter of discernment. Sometimes it's okay. But if it's very clear, avoid that. Kind of an obvious one. But again, I've seen people try it. If somebody's under the influence, if you get to talking to somebody, it's on the weekend, and they're clearly wasted, they may be very talkative, but it's okay to leave a track and politely excuse yourself, and here's why. You're not going to reason or talk with somebody that's under the influence. That doesn't mean you can't. That doesn't mean they don't need the gospel. It means you may have to come back on a different day when they're sober. People get very argumentative when they're under the influence. Very, very argumentative, and just avoid it altogether. Again, can I leave this with you? Okay, you have a great afternoon, and we'll maybe try to stop by later. Just avoiding it. Just avoiding it altogether, and ultimately leaving the gospel. Next, don't have lengthy conversations with children or teens that come to the door. Immediately ask, hey, is mom or dad home, or grandma or grandpa? There may have been a time or place that was okay. It's just not. It's just not anymore. And it avoids all appearance of evil. It's being blameless. Not that that child doesn't need to hear the gospel, or you can't later on follow through when their parents are there. But the fact that, two individual adults talk to my child, for 15 minutes at the front door, that doesn't say anything good at all. It just doesn't. Mannerisms, just avoid that. Don't enter a gated or fenced house unless the circumstances are right to do so. This may be very much for your benefit, not for somebody else. Sometimes if there's a fence, my mom taught me when we used to do bus visitation stuff, she had this deal, and she still does it to this day. If there's ever a fenced-in yard, she'll go and she'll take the gate and she'll rattle it. Because usually if you rattle it, if there's a dog somewhere, they will instantly come. If you want to avoid altercation with a dog, don't just immediately go into somebody's fence. Again, there's some fences that are constructed in a way it's fine to go in, but just respect that, or leave a track maybe by the lock or something, but just respect that. It's there for a reason, and be a part of that. Next, don't get into arguments. The gospel, and we'll talk about this in a second, the gospel is a confronting message. There's confrontation that happens. Why? Because you're telling somebody, trying to help somebody understand you're a sinner. But arguments, they don't go anywhere. They don't. And usually, I've been around a lot of whether you're talking to an atheist or somebody from a different religious background, or somebody that's been hurt in the past and therefore has a hardness to those things. If things get to a point where you can tell by discernment it's going to lead to an argument, I still have yet to see, and I may be wrong if somebody knows of one, I've yet to see an instance where an argument leads to somebody bowing their head and accepting Christ. I've yet personally, I may be wrong about that, but most of the time what happens is that person gets in the flesh, then my pride acts up and gets in the flesh, and then what happens is there's a distancing from what you're trying to say. And so if it's starting to get there, just politely excuse, hey, can we follow up on a different day? If you can tell from a conversation, there's not an openness, this is not going anywhere. And maybe on a different day. People have that. You and I have days that are good days and bad days. And sometimes you'll witness to somebody one day and it is not the day, and you go back 3 days later and they might be your best friend by the end of it. That's just how it works sometimes. If in discernment you understand, okay, this is not going anywhere. It's not just a matter of they disagree. Because the gospel, again, is a confrontational message. But there's a difference between me convincing somebody of the truth and telling them you're wrong biblically, and also allowing my pride and flesh to get in the way to where it leads to an argument. Just don't do it. It's a mannerism. Again, what I say is how people instantly are going to perceive the person behind the message that I'm saying. And there's so many opportunities where there's been a failed opportunity just because a believer who is very ready and zealous about giving the gospel allowed their flesh to get in the way. An argument ensued, and what ended up happening is by the end of it, the person they were witnessing to didn't come any closer to the knowledge of truth. They had more and more of an excuse to distance themselves. Does that make sense? And I want to avoid that. We ought to want to avoid that. Why? Because ultimately my goal is to get them Jesus Christ. Again, you're going to meet people that are very obstinate, that are going to need to be confronted with biblical views that are going to conflict their ideology. That is going to be that's a part of witnessing, but that can be done in a Christ-like manner. It doesn't have to be done in an argument. It doesn't have to be done in flesh. Study the examples of Christ whenever he was in debates with the Pharisees. Ultimately, that's my goal, okay? Represent Christ and how he did things. I'm his ambassador. Therefore, when I soul win, I had to follow those. Another little thing that may just be a help. Some people get really hesitant about no soliciting signs. Most everybody knows that doesn't apply to tracts or church literature because we're not selling anything. And so that's okay. That's not if somebody has a no soliciting sign, I'm still going to knock. Now, sometimes, and very rarely is this the case, but sometimes somebody may get annoyed because they think you disregarded my no soliciting sign. If that's the case, very clearly say, this is my intention, this is why we're here, we're not selling anything. And if they're still against that and want you to leave and get off their porch, just politely dismiss yourself, and that's how you handle it. Leave in a Christ-like manner. But those are some things, again, there may be a whole host of other things that y'all have encountered or watched people do that are no-nos. Those are some general things that are just helps. Next week, we're going to look at specific conversation as far as very practical. If I walk up to the door and Greg Wheat answers, where do I even start? How much time should I try to do small talk? How much time should I do this? What's the purpose of the partner that's standing next to me? How long should I be talking? Where should I immediately go? We're going to look at that next week, but these are things that seem so small, but they're so, so very important. I want to see lastly, real quick before we pray, a list of things that are a good idea to do. These are things that are good mannerism, good things to be a part, practices to be a part of when I soul win. First, it's a great practice to pray before you and your partner ever knock on the first door. We talked about last week. Don't underestimate and don't ignore the fact that the Holy Spirit is the one that deals with men's hearts. So before I ever soul win, God, you know the doors we're about to knock. You know who's home, who's not home. Father, I pray that you begin to soften the hearts, Lord, of those. And if there's even one individual, God, you'd soften their heart to the gospel presentation, that you give us the wisdom and clarity of what to say, Lord, that you move any distractions that the enemy would want to place in. Those things are so important and very appropriate when it comes to soul winning. Prayer. Second, appearance as far as in being dressed. No, I don't think you have to have a suit and tie to go soul winning. And I'll just tell you my personal opinion. It's just too hot down here. It just is. Now, I'm not against if somebody wants to go in a suit and tie. I know more recently, and I've been soul winning in a suit and tie. Okay, so I'm not speaking about something I'm not knowing about. But even today, when you go in a suit and tie, most people will think you're who? Jehovah's Witness, okay? Does that mean that I have to go in street clothes? No. Again, appearance should be important. It should be important. Clean, well-dressed, well-groomed. Again, remember, I'm an ambassador of Jesus Christ. Some things that are help. I'm not going to tell you specifically. When we have a church-wide outreach, there's some things I would recommend. As far as gentlemen, it'd be appropriate to wear this, ladies this. Some 3 words that are very helpful in what to wear and you deciding that are modesty, neatness, and appropriateness. Those are important words: modesty, neatness, appropriateness. This isn't youth camp. It's not official dress code. And it's not the pastor policing what goes out. This is the fact of me understanding I'm an ambassador of Christ, and the first thing before somebody ever hears what I say, they're going to see who I am, what I look like. There ought to be a little bit of a difference. Again, it doesn't mean I have to have a 3-piece suit on, but there ought to be a difference. between me and some people think, well, there's a lot more openness if you dress, like the world does. That's being conformed, not being transformed. And I don't believe at all that that's a way in which to win the world, by dressing like the world. I don't believe that at all. Cleanness, neatness, appropriate, hair done, whether that's a button-up, a polo, a skirt, things that are neat, they're appropriate. Why? You can think that seems such a big deal. And I know people that won't go because of maybe what it would take to wear. I'm representing Jesus Christ. I am. And so when I sow in, it's not because I'm the pastor, but when I sow in, because of who I'm representing, I'm going to dress differently than when I do yard work. I'm going to dress differently than when I'm hanging out of my house. I just am. It's not to make somebody feel uncomfortable or me feel elite in any way. It's because of who I'm representing, and that it's important. So understanding that as far as how I dress. Next, this is going to seem so not important. Carry breath mints or gum or brush teeth before you go. You think that is the last and most not important thing. If ultimately my goal is to get in a conversation with somebody, I want to be talking with somebody. And the last thing I want to be a hindrance is the fact that I have bad breath when I show up. And it can be, again, you think that is not important. If what I'm saying is important, the little things will be important. What I'm saying is important, I ought to take care to the little things. Those are all things. Everything that we've talked about are things that you and I can control, right? They're not things that are dependent on somebody else. They're things that I can control. Mannerisms, small things that I can be a help in doing that. Next, let them know as soon as they open the door who you and your partner are and where you're from. We're going to talk about it next week as far as what specifically to say, but it ought to be a practice. The moment you knock on the door, and if it was me and my wife, the moment they answer, hey, how are you doing? I'm Stephen Newport. This is my wife, Teresa, and we're from Crossroads Baptist Church. When I did that, automatically, I'm opening up to them. I'm taking away any hindrance of the fact of these people are strangers and I have no clue who they are. Now, they're not best friends now, but now it's not a matter of these people, I have no clue about them. Ultimately, when it comes to witnessing, I'm wanting somebody to open up. And my job as a soul winner is to take initiative to lead and open up first. Okay, this is who I am. It may start, when we'll talk about next week, it may start with me giving my personal testimony. I think that's a lot of personal information. We're talking about somebody's soul. And if we're getting to a point where I'm wanting that person to open up and understand that they're a lost individual who needs Christ's saving grace, it may take the fact that I've got to lead on that. By opening up the fact that any barrier, any uncomfortableness, that by the end of our visit, you know who I am. You've met my partner, how long we've been going to the church, maybe a little about our families, I don't know. Something that I'm taking away that awkwardness, that unfamiliarity to that, or even telling them a little bit about myself. Let them know quickly who you are. Next, even in a serious conversation, be friendly, polite, considerate. Represent Christ even in those things, even if it's confronting. And then last, even if there's no opportunity to talk, even if you've talked for 2 minutes or you've had an hour-long conversation, make it a practice, leave somebody with a contact information or church information. Leave a tract. Sometimes you think, I talked for 10 minutes and it didn't go anywhere. So that's kind of a bummer. Leave a tract. Always make it a practice. Leave a tract. And here's what happens. They may have not come to an understanding in that first 10 minutes, but if I leave a tract, maybe later on, they'll read that tract, they'll think about our conversation, and they may come to an understanding of salvation on their own. leave a track, leave a way to get back in contact. If they want to know how to get a hold of the church, those things, leave a track with them. It's a good practice. Soul winning is certainly confrontational. It just is. There's no way around it. We don't go out and say it. It's not the starting line. But ultimately, you're trying to help somebody realize you're a sinner. That's a confrontational message. It is. And something that our flesh doesn't like to hear. Just because it's a confrontational message doesn't mean that I have to lose my testimony or devalue the testimony of Christ in witnessing. In fact, if I'm doing that, I'm not doing the work God called me to do. Paul says, I want you, in 1 Thessalonians, he said, be mindful of what manner of men we were among you. I'm an ambassador of Christ. It makes a difference, the little things. Soul winning is, again, confrontational, but it shouldn't be done in a prideful spirit or in criticism of a person. I can confront a person about their sin without losing my temper. That should go without saying, but it's, especially if we're an outspoken person, it can be very, very easy to forget. I can confront somebody about their sin without getting in the flesh and losing my temper. I can and should. That's something I should strive to do. It ought to be my desire to begin pointing someone to Christ by what they see of me and hear me say. The whole purpose of this tonight, it ought to be my desire that the moment I knock on the door, the moment that they open up the door and they see me and hear the first few words out of my mouth, that I'm instantly starting to point somebody to Christ just by what they see and what they hear me say. How do I do that? Mannerisms. Mannerisms, just little things. Little things. Why? Not because I'm important, but the person and message that I'm carrying is important. I'm an ambassador. I represent so much more than Stephen Newport. I do. So much more. Mannerisms, pay very close attention to those things. The little things, even manners, matter. And God help us to be mindful of the kind of ambassadors we are for him. Like I said this evening, very practical, very may seem more like procedure. It's not. I debated very heavily on whether or not to even make this a part of the study, but just little things. Little things that when we're striving to do that and to grow as a soul winner ought to be a part of what we do. Next week, Lord willing, we're going to go over specifically ways to navigate a conversation. And that's usually the biggest thing. Once you understand, okay, this is the gospel message. These are things I should avoid. These are important practices to do. Okay, how do I start? What do I begin to say when I knock on somebody's door? What are different scenarios that I may have to discern through? And we're going to go over those next week, Lord willing. I'm very excited to do that and even to field questions about things and experiences that you've had. And ultimately, this is not to tell you this is what an elite soul winner should do. These are tools, they're helps, things that if there's something that God uses to embolden and encourage you and I to soul win more than we are, then praise the Lord. That's the purpose. That's the goal of it. Take away distractions, anything that would be a hindrance, and to get busy after it. So we'll wrap up, and we've got just a little bit of time, but kind of split up and just pray for the things that were mentioned and close out the night. So continue to be in prayer for the group in the back and the opportunity they have to present the gospel. Do it. Let's go. Yes. Don't. I'm laughing not at you, but I'm laughing because I've been soul winning with people where that was the case. Don't. The goal is not to get physically into the house, especially I would say probably that was more common back in the day to happen. As far as somebody invites you in, it's not as common today. Most conversations you're going to have are going to happen on the porch. They just are. And as you get to go in, that's great. That's wonderful. And there's other things that can be a help with that. But yeah, the goal is not to invite yourself into the house. That can be put somebody in a really awkward position for sure. So again, little things, and they may seem so minor. And I had a general idea of who's going to be here tonight. And I know these are not shocking new revelations to anybody, but they're just reminders. They're just reminders, little things. The little things matter, whether it's witnessing to somebody at work or door knocking. So let's go ahead and pray, and then we will be dismissed once that is done.